It is UFC 296 time. And I want to go through two things real quick here before we get into the fight predictions and the breakdowns. One is the normal thing. Don't bet a lot of money on MMA. don't do that to yourself. Every time I see one of these guys like put down like 20 grand or something on a fight and they lose, it's just like, that is so dumb. So dumb. To quote the great Jared Kiso as Shorzy. Number two is this is a fight card that's a little bit weird because it's a UFC card because it's a pay-per-view and so on that everyone is fairly hyped for. There's a lot of hype on social media. There's a lot of hype on the podcast. There's a lot of hype just in the people I talk to. And I don't have that hype. I look at this card and it's nothing against the fighters because I respect every fighter on this card. Really intrinsically all the way through. Even if it's someone like a Tony Ferguson, who I think is, done. He's a guy I at one point respected as like one of the best fighters in the world. So like in that regard, the resumes, the names, they're phenomenal. But the matchups themselves, analytically speaking, don't really appeal to me. But if you right there, if you are hyped about these fights, please continue to be. Don't let me put a wet blanket on that. Don't let me take away that fun because it's a card I wish I had more hype for. It's a card that I wish I was one of those people on Twitter, on social media who was like very hyped for this card. And I truly hope not to ruin it for anyone. It's just I find that the fights, analytically speaking, are a little bit obvious. Either it's going to go one way or it's going to go the other way, and that's really kind of it. And I guess I just never really buy much into the pageantry. Like I don't find Colby Covington's trash talk to be riveting. I don't find Paddy Pimblett's gimmick to be riveting. I don't feel necessarily all that good about Wonderboy versus Shavkat Rakhmonov. I like both of those fighters, but like the combination's a little bit rough. And then like Pantoja versus Royval, it's a rematch. But like, anyways, let's get into this. Colby Covington, Leon Edwards headlines the card, welterweight title of the UFC here. I am really cheering for Leon Edwards. And it's not a matter of like disliking Colby Covington. I do, to be clear. But it's more that like if Colby Covington wins this fight, they're already talking about ways to get around giving Bilal Muhammad a title shot, which I think he's earned. Even if I'm not actually all that interested in the fight, I think he's earned it. And I don't want to see Colby's pitched out the idea of fighting Kamaru Usman for a third time. I don't want to see that. I have no interest in that idea. I have no interest in the likely Conor McGregor fight that they'll probably try to put together. I have no interest in seeing Donald Trump pin the belt around his waist. I just, it's like the worst possible thing. Like it's not some big fandom of Leon Edwards. It's not some big disbelief in Colby Covington because I've always respected Colby Covington in the cage. He's kind of always I was the guy who back in the day defended like John Fitch getting a title shot and stuff. Like I was the guy who like appreciated the hustle and making the most out of what you got. And that's what Colby Covington does. That's his whole thing. He's not extraordinarily explosive, strong, fast, powerful. None of these things. Not particularly strong. He's got an amazing cardio. He's got an amazing gas tank, I should say, or amazing cardio. He's got a chin, and he goes out there and he makes the most of it, like he always did, like with his high volume striking approach, interesting use of kicks to set up takedowns, and just like kind of out scramble people and like just put it to them, put a pace to them that eventually would break them and get him a victory. I just don't like everything else that goes along with it. And here's the thing is, I'm really starting to question if the things that brought him to the dance are still there. Because I've kind of, been rewatching his fights. And you watch the George Masvidal fight. And a number of his takedowns get stuffed in that fight. A number of them. And he just doesn't look good. There's no real presence with the kicks that have been there in the past. It's more of this kind of like safer boxing thing. It's almost like getting knocked out by Kamaru Usman. Like kind of broke something inside of him. And I think you even see it in the second Kamaru Usman fight until he realizes that like this whole new idea, this whole safer idea just ain't working. And then the old Colby, comes out and we get ourselves a great like showing. So I think that like that's in there. But like I also have to ask this question. He's 35 years old. The record of 35-year-old and older fighters in title fights is terrible. It's something like 2-35, 2-30, something like that. It's quite bad. Like 35 appears to be like that magical number that at least below 185 means you're old. And you have two fights where Covington has looked more vulnerable and less effective than he has ever, before in the Masvidal fight and the first half of the second Kamaru fight. And the fact that he has been out for, 21 months? A year and 9 months where he hasn't come back, hasn't fought. And a lot of his wins are incredibly hollow. Like if you look at Colby Covington's record and you realize that like beating George Masvidal at 38 years old, I do believe, 37 years old, doesn't really mean a ton. Beating Tyron Woodley after he's lost the belt and is like pretty much done at 38 years old, doesn't mean much. Beating a 37-year-old Robbie Lawler, a 33. Okay. RDA was only 33. I was thinking RDA was older. Okay, so you have to go back to 2018 for him to beat a guy who's under the age of 35. And even before that, you're at like Demi and Maya, 39 years old. By the way, someone was trying to use the Demi and Maya one as like this great example of him like breaking someone. And or I think what it was is someone on Twitter was using like the Demi and Maya fight as like an example of like, he just kind of wasn't doing well until Maya got tired. And someone else responded with like, well, what made Maya get tired? I'm like, I don't know. The fact that he's 39 years old, never has had a gas tank for striking and always gets tired. Like, I mean, you can go back to Demi and Maya versus Mark Munoz to find like Demi and Maya getting tired, having to strike with someone for a round. It's just kind of weird. Like there's no fight that compares to this. The most similar fight he's had to Leon Edwards is Kamaru. And it's not very similar, and he lost both the fights. So I don't know. There's a weird certainty that people have that Colby's gonna win that it just doesn't make any sense to me. Why do I think Leon Edwards is going to win this fight? Well, number one, he's 6'2". He is a massive welterweight. He is huge. He is hard to wrestle. Like people have been making jokes about, probably because he's English and the old joke about English wrestling, that he'll just get out wrestled by Colby Covington time and time again. I don't think that's going to happen. Very few people have had prolonged wrestling success against Leon Edwards. And Leon is the better striker in terms of form, in terms of power, in terms of variety of technique. He is better. Like Colby's striking always was just pace. It married well to his wrestling game, but like it was always bad. And I have no doubt that he's going to give Edwards some problems. Edwards, for one, can be kind of passive and like bizarrely defensively irresponsible. Like his defense is good, but like every so often you'll have a moment like the Nate Diaz fight was the classic example of this, where it's just like, how did you get hit by that? Why did you get hit by that? Why? But like the reach advantage, the size advantage he has, the athletic advantage he has, he should be able to keep this mostly standing. He is the better boxer. He has the better physical frame for that game. And he looks like he's kind of in his prime. Like he looked really good against Kamaru Usman. Like never better than in that third Usman fight. And comparatively speaking, Colby is the older guy. He's at that age where like the regression should hit us. And I think he is already regressing a little bit. I think the Usman fights took a lot out of him. And I think broke him a little bit. So I am going to take Leon Edwards to win. I still think Colby's tough enough that we're probably going to decision. And Leon is not the biggest finisher, obviously. That's the big hope that Colby's going to have, is that Leon, being the type of fighter he is, will probably give him the time to try to find something, to try to find that big moment. But I don't think that he's physically in a place to do that, and I don't think he has the style to do that, really. So yeah, I got to go with Edwards via unanimous decision. Edwards is the favorite at minus 160 to minus 178. And Covington plus 130 to plus 138. I had TKO written down here. I think I am going to go with decision. So there's that. And then you have the co-main event, UFC Flyweight title, Alexandre Pantoja versus Brandon Royval 2. I love that Brandon Royval is getting a title shot because he's like a super exciting fighter. Like, this is going to be a really, really fun fight with a lot of scrambling, a lot of battling for position, and some reversals and stuff. But it is kind of like what it was before. Royval is a fighter that has to keep scrambling with you. He has to keep the scramble going because there's not a particularly stopping factor to his striking or his grappling. What I don't mean by that is not finishing, but like the ability to terminate exchanges does not exist in Royval's game. He utilizes weaponizes his cardio in that way to just keep going. You get a break when the bell comes. That's it. Other than that, you don't get a break. You don't get a break with Brandon Royval, or you give up. You break, or you break to get the break. You know what I mean? And Pantoja showed last time they fought that he can just kind of body lock him and actually stop, actually terminate the scramble and like get on his back and do his thing. And he's a better striker. He's a more powerful striker. And as much as Pantoja definitely gets tired, like you watch Pantoja fight, the man is tired. It's not some endless gas tank or whatever, but he still fights, and the power, the strength, the ability to be Pantoja continues through any fatigue and allows him to still be what he is. And like I said, I don't see this fight going any differently than the first time. Like, I'm not saying it's a carbon copy, but not much has really changed. And as a result, I got to take Pantoja to get the back control in a scramble and apply the rear naked choke, because he's very, very, very deadly from back mount, both as a rear naked choke guy and as a ground and pounder. So Pantoja by submission. I am surprised he's only a minus 190 to minus 205 favorite. I'm actually surprised by that. Royval plus 130, 155 to 163. He's like, he's a slightly bigger favorite than Leon Edwards, and I expected a fair amount of difference there. Third fight of the night is where we get the big gap, because you've got Shavkat Rakhmonov coming in at minus 549 to minus 720. That's a very big range. And Wonderboy Stephen Thompson coming in at plus 400 to plus 475. There's a lot of things about Rakhmonov that Wonderboy can exploit. Like, I was one of those guys who watched the Jeff Neal fight, and I was impressed with Rakhmonov. Don't get me wrong. He finished Jeff Neal. That's not nothing. His offense looked very potent, but the defense looked very bad. It looked very, very hittable. And Wonderboy, being one of the best strikers at 170 in the division, should probably be able to hit him a fair bit, I would think. But the thing is that I don't think Rakhmonov is like Kevin Holland. And what I mean by that is that where Kevin Holland was content to actively pass up opportunities to take down Stephen Wonderboy Thompson and employ a grappling game against him, I don't think Rakhmonov's going to do that. I think Rakhmonov's going to come out here and he's going to want to throw some hands. He's going to want to strike. But like, I think the idea that he'll just keep standing with him isn't there. He'll at some point apply a wrestling and a grappling game to Wonderboy, and that has not gone well for Wonderboy as of late. It's not just like a feeling that we kind of always had, but like, it's like Bilal Muhammad, Gilbert Burns, they both broke him down really effectively. And at 40 years old, it's hard to take Stephen Wonderboy Thompson that seriously as a guy who is going to compete with the absolute elite of this division, unless they are very selected for him to be like just strikers. So at some point, I see this going to the ground. Rakhmonov has the physicality. He has the aggression. There's only so much he's going to be allow himself to get hit in the head before he's like, you know what? I should grab a hold of this guy, this old man, and throw him to the canvas, start beating on him, and get the rear naked choke or a guillotine choke or whatever. He's got an arsenal of chokes that he can apply. So I've got Rakhmonov by submission. He's a massive, massive favorite. So do not bet this line. Unless you feel, I don't know. I don't even know if I'd bet on Wonderboy Thompson on this line. But like, I sure as heck would not bet on Rakhmonov. Then we have Tony Ferguson versus Paddy Pimblett in a 155-pound match. I'm not picking Tony Ferguson to beat anybody. And there are two fighters later on this card that kind of feel like the same. One fights in a division that I may actually, have to pick her in. Kind of gave away who it is. But yeah, Tony Ferguson was unconventional, unique, unorthodox, weird, crazy. And he got away with that by being extremely tough, having great cardio, great power, great speed, and great explosiveness. And he's 39 years old. Pretty much everything I listed right there, gone. I think the cardio is still there to a certain degree, which is why I don't think this whole Goggins deal, training with Goggins, is really any good, because he's just being worked exceptionally hard for no real benefit. Like, his problem is he really can't take punches anymore. His offense is not terribly effective without that speed, without that explosiveness, without that power, because it was always built on those things. It was never built on proper technique. And like, to be clear, I want to say something here. It's not even that Tony Ferguson built his game wrong, and that's why he's on a 6-fight losing streak. It's because he's 39 years old and at lightweight. Like, I don't think that there's anything to fix here. I don't think even if you could go back in time and impart proper defensive fundamentals of head movement, of a guard, of footwork, of like, just like you cram a textbook into Tony Ferguson's head and make him less weird and less goofy, he still probably is in regression at this point of his career. It's even worse when your entire game was based on that physicality. He's up against Paddy Pimblett, who is no one's idea of world beater. Realistically speaking, he is a pretty good grappler, pretty good back take game, pretty good rear naked choke game. Striker, he's terrible. Like, he's got power and he's got like physicality, being they got him listed at 5'10". I swear he's got to be more than 5'10", but 5'10", 73-inch reach, lightweight, which is pretty impressive. But like, outside of hitting reasonably hard, like, his chin is way in the air. He has to be incredibly thankful that he has a reasonably durable chin, that it is actually quite hard to knock him out. And I would not be surprised if Tony Ferguson lit him up with one punch at some point, like, just like sent him tumbling, and he survives or whatever. But like, that scary moment that he kind of gave Michael Chandler or Bobby Green, who are, well, Bobby Green is a far better striker. Chandler, not so much. But there's just a physicality that I don't think Ferguson answers with anybody. And I think, as much as I would pick prime Tony, easily, and even like slightly post prime Tony really easily, I can't pick 39-year-old Tony. So I got to go with Paddy Pimblett by submission, probably to hurt him at some point, put him down, get his back, get the rear naked choke. There you go. That's what I think. And the UFC will have what it wants there, because it wants to get big wins on Paddy Pimblett, and it wants to make Paddy Pimblett into a star, which is never really going to work because he's just not good enough. It's just honestly not good enough. The gift of gab only will take you so far before the fact that you're losing gets in the way. Paddy Pimblett is a minus 300 to minus 333 favorite. Ferguson is a plus 240 to plus 250 underdog. We were supposed to get Vicente Luque versus Ian Garry. I was going to take Ian Garry in that fight, but he is pulled out with pneumonia, apparently. The circus around Ian Garry is just weird. I'll leave it at that. Then we have featherweight bout Josh Emmett versus Bryce Mitchell. This is a late notice fight. It was supposed to be Giga Chikadze versus Josh Emmett, which I was probably going to pick Giga Chikadze in. I just don't really trust Josh Emmett against like a dynamic big hitter after watching him get pretty thoroughly beat down by Yair Rodriguez and Ilia Topuria. Giga, obviously, much worse fighter than either of those guys. But there are certain concerns I have about 38-year-old Josh Emmett and his ability to just take big shots. This is a way more forgiving matchup. And it's not because I think Bryce Mitchell is a worse fighter than Giga Chikadze. I would probably take Bryce Mitchell to beat Giga Chikadze. It's the stylistic nature of this matchup is something that I think Bryce Mitchell has had a problem with before. Because he's facing a guy who's going to be very hard to take down, very hard to hold down. Shouldn't say very hard to take down. Doesn't seem like Josh Emmett's actually that hard to get down. But keeping him down, that's a different story. Man explodes back to his feet, scrambles very, very well. Has no neck really to go after. And hits really hard. And Bryce Mitchell is not a bad striker. He's pretty creative. I like some of his interesting use of kicks and whatever. But he is remarkably not very physical. Doesn't hit very hard. Not super strong. Not super explosive. Super fast. He lacks all of that. He's kind of like what I was talking about with Colby Covington earlier. Only the difference is he doesn't have Colby's cardio. And he gets tired in a lot of his fights. So he's going to be trying to take Josh Emmett down. It's hard to do. Hard to keep him down. And Emmett hits really, really hard. His striking is not especially good. I want to make that clear. But there's a power to it and explosiveness to it that he's just a phenomenal athlete. And it's really a shame that his career took so long to kind of get into things that by the time he was in title contention, he was north of 35 years old. And there's always a chance that at 38 years old, things just stop working, full stop. Like there's a precipitous drop off of everything that he likes to do. And it just all falls apart. And like injuries maybe even come into play, whatever. But it's hard to really imagine, the Bryce Mitchell that had a hard time beating Dan Ige and who got, pretty much pants by Ilia Topuria, coming out here and actually handling the power squat wrestling physique of Josh Emmett. It's really hard to think about that. And that is why I got to go with Josh Emmett, especially on short notice. I think on a full camp, Bryce Mitchell is I don't want to say a smart guy. He's a smart fighter. He's a bit of a dumb guy, bit of a dumb person. But as a fighter, he's remarkably good at figuring out things and finding solutions. He's the type of guy that if something's not working, he will do something else, which sounds really, really, really simple when I put it that way. But a lot of fighters don't. But I do have to take Josh Emmett by decision. I just don't see him getting him down enough. I don't see him holding him down. And I don't see him really being able to do his path to victory is pretty hard countered by what Josh Emmett does. I'm not super surprised to see Bryce Mitchell as a minus 200 to minus 225 favorite. I'm a little surprised it's that wide but I get it. Emmett's lost 2 in a row and has looked really bad. But I will be betting Emmett at the plus 168 to plus 185 line that is in play. He's one of the 2 underdogs on this card that I feel really good about. Irene Aldana versus Carol Rosa. Women's bantamweight fight here. Never been the biggest believer in Irene Aldana. When she got the title shot, I was like, this is kind of sad. And Nunez, dealt with her and then retired. But she is functional. What I mean by that is she believes in what she's doing. Yeah, there's There are some issues with her in the clinch. There are some issues with her grappling. There are issues everywhere. But she's functional in all phases of the game, and she has confidence in herself and an ability to push a pace and just not be plagued by self-doubt, which is the problem with Carol Hossa. Is that when she came in, I was very impressed with Carol Hossa initially. She could strike off the back foot. She struck at a high pace. She had a strong clinch game. And the last 4 fights she's had, even though she's won 2 of them, she has looked broken. It's the Karolina Kowalkiewicz syndrome of she found out that people could do things to her, and it's eroded her ability to believe in what she's doing. So a fight that I might have even picked her in a couple years ago has suddenly become this idea of I don't really know how she wins. She doesn't fight at the pace that she should. She fights very lazily in the clinch. There's nothing there. There's no spark there, really at all. And so I got to take Aldana by decision because Hossa's still tough, and I think she'll see the final bell. But there's just a fundamental dysfunction to her game now, and you got to pick Aldana. So minus 185 to minus 210 on Aldana, plus 150 to plus 165 on Hossa. Would not bet on Hossa. Would not really bet on Aldana at those odds either. Cody Garbrandt versus Brian Kelleher. This is my other underdog pick. I'm picking Brian Kelleher. Why? I can't pick Cody Garbrandt. I can't do that. I can't watch a guy, beat Trevin Jones for 2 rounds because Trevin Jones is just super passive. And then the moment Trevin Jones is you know what? What if I just hit him? What if I throw a combination? What if I try to do anything at all to take the fight to Cody Garbrandt, and I almost knock him out and almost win the fight? It's not that I think Garbrandt has the most glass chin in the world. It's that his defense was always so bad, so very bad, that any durability, any granite, any cement, any hardwood in that chin has been replaced by fiberglass. He's still dangerous. He still hits hard. He's still fast. He's still explosive. He's 32 years old. The body is still functioning outside of the chin, but there is no chin there. It has progressively become less and less and less to actually just hurt this guy. I can't pick it. I can't pick it. He's trying to retool his game into something more defensively safe and sound, but he's battling with his own mind on that. His mind wants to go and be the Viking berserker and go out there and get in the pocket and exchange power hooks with his opponent. It doesn't want to work behind a jab. It doesn't want to work safe combination punching. It wants to go. And he could absolutely beat Brian Kelleher. Brian Kelleher is 37 years old. That's pretty old for the division. He's got 14 losses. 7 of them were even pre-UFC. He starts really, really slow, but comes out really, really fast. It's the sort of thing the body is takes a while to warm up, but he wants to get after it. He wants to get in there. He wants to do some things. And Garbrandt could totally catch him and put him down. But I think Kelleher will TKO him. And it's also the Kelleher doesn't really get knocked out particularly. He gets hurt, but he tends to get finished by submission. Garbrandt doesn't do that. I'm not saying he can't, but there's no really lethal submission game or step-by-step breakdown on the ground from Garbrandt. He's going to try and knock him out. And it might work, but it probably won't. Casey O'Neill, odds. Garbrandt's minus 185 to minus 225. Kelleher plus 150 to plus 172. I will be placing a bet on Brian Kelleher. Casey O'Neill, Ariane Lipski. Next up, women's flyweight. These are both ladies that I see really good potential in, but also like there's this nagging thought that I cannot trust them at all. And with O'Neal, it's just a pure physicality thing. I think that she thinks that she is a powerful athlete, and she really isn't. She's pretty pillow fisted. She doesn't have the most physical takedown game ever. She actually had a hard time physically dominating Roxanne Modafferi. That's a problem. But there's hustle in her game. She keeps up a good pace. She does have a really, really good top game when she gets to actually utilize it. And she does seem reasonably well prepared most of the time. In Lipski's case, the do not trust is more mental. She has the power, the speed, the explosiveness to be a top-notch fighter. Probably to fight for a title, honestly. Like, if you're just like kind of like lining up physicality, she should probably get a title shot at some point. But there are kind of three modes to her. The first mode is what she came into the UFC with, which is this hyper-aggressive style that was violent and entertaining, but also led to the ability to just kind of be short-circuited by counters and wrestling and takedowns. And that version of her loses to Casey O'Neill pretty easily because she probably just gets put on her back. Probably gets finished at some point. The second, well, I'm going to talk about the third, then the second. The third is when she's battling against her nature and her natural aggression, sort of like Garbrandt. It ends up being like this super passive fighter. And there's just not enough volume there. And there were points in the Melissa Gatto fight, which I thought she lost, where that side of her came out and let Gatto, not a good striker, not a particularly diverse striker, not a particularly, and someone who wasn't getting takedowns, to just kind of take the fight to her and kind of take her lunch money. And then there's the middle zone, which is, the sweet spot, where the aggression is, there, but controlled. And her technique is good, but there's urgency that creates volume. And if that comes out, I think she can beat Casey O'Neill. But I don't trust that that's there, at least not consistently. It hasn't been there consistently in any of her fights, really, outside of Mandy Bohm, who just is not a UFC caliber fighter. That's all there is to it. And then most of the JJ Aldrich fight, but she also got knocked out by Priscilla Cachoeira. She had problems with Montana Del Rosa, Antonina Shevchenko back in 2021 and 2020, respectively. The Gatto fight, like I said, I thought she lost. I have to go with Casey O'Neill because I know what I'm getting with Casey O'Neill. If the best form of Ariane Lipski shows up, she'll win. I don't trust that form to exist, or to exist at least for 15 minutes. So I've got O'Neill by decision to just put out more more volume. There we go. More volume, more pace, more consistent offense. And if a takedown comes, a takedown comes. And Lipski could get just stuck on her back. And that even includes with people who are not amazing at controlling her. And O'Neill is. O'Neill is the favorite, minus 180 to minus 210. Lipski is a plus 154 to plus 162 favorite. Then we get to Alonzo Menifield versus Dustin Jacoby. Very, very similar to the Khalil Roundtree fight with Dustin Jacoby, realistically speaking. And it's not just because they're athletic black men. It's that if you really think about it, Roundtree and Menifield are kind of the very, very, very similar. Roundtree is a better version of Menifield in the sense that they are both powerful, both aggressive, both a little bit inconsistent, a little bit questionable fight IQ at times. and a little bit repetitive. They'll have an idea in their head that they want to utilize in the fight, and they will kind of utilize it to exhaustion. And if you have someone like Dustin Jacoby, who is a very, very good technical kickboxer, very much a guy who can take it apart, there's going to be problems. Roundtree was able to still beat him, but I don't think Menifield can. Like, as much as Menifield has some things he's better at, wrestling particularly, grappling for another, I don't really see him being able to repetitively take Jacoby down. Jacoby, at one point, had really terrible takedown defense. Like, I remember his fights at 185 in his first run in the UFC. The wrestling was a massive Achilles heel. But since coming back at 205 and having seasoned himself more and also becoming a better striker, that hasn't quite been the case. He's learned to kind of stop some things and to maintain some distance and, work at a range. He has an amazing jab, has a low kick game that is quite solid. And he also tends to get better and better as the fight goes on. And Menifield also has a gassing issue. And I don't think it's like a pace issue. I don't think it's I think it's a mental exhaustion that tends to come in when things are hard for him. And Jacoby, with his durability and his quality striking and his ability to find patterns and capitalize on them for himself, is just a really hard fight. I've got Jacoby by decision. He's incredibly durable. He's been stopped like 4 times in his entire career. And the only guy who's like deaded him is Alex Pereira. Jacoby is a minus 250 to minus 300 favorite. Menifield coming in at plus 200 to plus 240. Tadger Ulanbekov versus Cody Durden. Men's flyweight fight. I've got to take Ulanbekov here. I'm not going to beat too much around the bush. There are definitely some things about Cody Durden that are kind of like Tim Elliott. But Tim Elliott is a lot funkier, a lot less predictable, a lot weirder, and also cheated like you would not believe to get the win over Ulanbekov when they met up. I think Durden's just too much of a straightforward American wrestler. And Ulanbekov, who's a very, very good grappler, good scrambler, a pretty good striker, actually, honestly. Like, it's definitely not his A game. It's not his primary thing, but like, he's probably the better striker of the two. Probably the better wrestler of the two, probably the better grappler of the two, probably the better athlete of the two, because Durden's not anyone's idea of like a high-grade athlete. Durden's run into all kinds of trouble on the ground, people. Thinking about the Jake Hadley fight, the loss to Jimmy Flick is another great example of that, where just like some poor decision-making ends up with him in trouble. And I could totally see Ulanbekov submitting him because he's got a good guillotine choke, and I don't think Durden's great at guarding his neck. But I'm going to go with decision. I'm going to go with Ulanbekov to just kind of out-scramble him, control him, do his thing, probably win the fight on the feet a little bit, and just get it done. He's only a minus 162 to minus 178 favorite. I'm tempted to bet on that. And Durden at plus 136 to plus 145. Andre Fili versus Lucas Almeida, men's featherweight bout. This is a weird matchup for Fili. This is one of the fights on the card that doesn't make a ton of sense. I mean, Fili is coming down from fighting Nathaniel Wood, admittedly in a losing effort, but that's notably above what this is. It's just notably above kind of really anything. Like, I kind of want to pull up his record here real quick. When was the last time Andre Fili fought someone of this like kind of level? Because like Nathaniel Wood, Bill Algeo, Joe Anderson Brito, Daniel Pineda, Bryce Mitchell, Charles Rodon, Sadiq Youssef. These are all bigger. Shaman Moraes probably back in like 2019 would be the case of that. I like Almeida. I like Almeida a bunch. But his problem is that he, at his best, he wants to get into the pocket and kind of have that sort of shoot-a-box, old school Brazilian style fight. And if you have the reach and the range to sort of punish him beyond that, like a Daniel Zellhuber did, and Fili has, you can do a fair bit against him at range. And if you can wrestle, he's very susceptible to being countershot at and put on his back. And Feely can do that. Feely is a team alpha male guy. He's an amazingly functional wrestler. And probably the best example of a striker out of team alpha male they've ever come up with, which is not necessarily saying a lot, but he does have a good jab, and he does have a 74-inch reach, which is 3 inches longer than Almeida. Almeida's not used to not having the reach. I think Feely is way more comfortable in a fight against somebody of relatively comparative size. And, like I said, they get into if they get into the pocket, he can counter shot on him and put him on his back. So I'm going to go with Andre Feely by decision to get it done. He's a minus 170 to minus 186 favorite. Almeida plus 143 to plus 145. That's a really close line. Shamil Gadzhiev versus Martin Buday. I was surprised that Buday is the favorite here. We'll get to the odds first on this one. Minus 135 to minus 162. And Gadzhiev at plus 110 to plus 125 because Gadzhiev was getting all kinds of love because of connections to, the Dagestani crew and connections to Cyril Gahn, if I'm not very much mistaken. And I don't think he's any good. I'm not saying he can't be dangerous. I think he is fairly explosive, fairly heavy-handed, has a pretty solid wrestling game. But there are serious cardio issues. Like his career up until this point is a lot of can crushing, or at least enhancement talent. One decent fight against one decent fighter. I'm trying to remember the guy's name. Kornikov. He went to split decision with him, and he looked terrible by the end of it. Kirill Koronov is not bad. And then, beating a 205er Darko Stosic and then winning on Dana White Contender Series against Greg Velasco in a fight that Velasco essentially got his back and then, realized he didn't really know how to grapple. And it went downhill from there. Martin Buday is heavyweight. just a very, very solid, hard to crush guy. He's huge. They're both 6'4", but Buday is a guy who cuts significant weight. I think last time he fought, it was something like 25 pounds he cut to make weight. That's insane. At this weight class, puts him near 300 pounds. And he's incredibly tough. He's got power. He's got pretty good cardio for a heavyweight, a guy his size. He does get stronger as the fight goes on. And I just can't imagine Gadzhiev comes out and just steamrolls him. Because, there's just too much durability there. There's too much. And he knows what to do on the ground. His grappling game against Josh Parisian was actually shown to be pretty goddamn competent. So, and Gadzhiev is not a great grappler. Gadzhiev is, a good wrestler who's fairly athletic. But his grappling game is no one's idea of great. So I got to go with Buday to survive the early storm, do what he does, capitalize on Gadzhiev as he gets tired, beat him down, break him down, land low kicks, he's surprisingly good at that, land elbows in the clinch, surprisingly good at that as well, and eventually find himself a TKO victory here to continue a pretty improbable run from professional gamer to UFC heavyweight semi-contender. He's never gonna. If he ever fights for the title, it is a sad, sad day. But if this would be what would this be? I want to say his 5th win in a row in the UFC. It would, yeah. Chris Barnett, Lucas Brzeski, Jake Collier, Josh Parisian, and now Shamil Gadzhiev. There you go. And the opener will be Randy Brown versus Muslim Salikov. Pretty interesting in this fight. There's not really a reason Randy Brown should lose it. He's got 8 inches in reach. He's got 4 inches in height. He's the more athletic fighter. He's the better technician in most ways. Salikov is a pretty low output kind of guy. He's 39 years old. He's got good power. He's got some good creativity. Don't get me wrong. He's a good fighter. I like watching him fight, but like, it doesn't feel like he's the guy who's going to pressure Randy Brown into what Randy Brown usually loses because of, which is Randy Brown has ADD. He is never the guy who accepts on doing something just well. He'll get bored of doing the thing that wins the fight. And he's like, we need to do something else. We need to change this up. We need to be cool. We need to do more. And that sometimes gets him into trouble. But like Salikov is kind of like more likely to just kind of sit back and do wushu things. And fight at a really low pace that won't necessarily capitalize on that. Won't bring the volume, won't bring the pressure that you kind of need to capitalize on that. So we've got Brown to be the faster guy, to be the better technician in a lot of ways, to be the better athlete, and pick up a decision win here. He's a minus 250 to minus 275 favorite to Salikov's plus 200 to plus 220. All right, thank you for tuning into the preview. I will see you guys after the fights, obviously, on Sunday. And I don't have much else to add. Check out the links down below for gaming stuff, my social media, and so on. And I will see you on the flip side of hopefully a card that has taken me from being pretty ho-hum to being really, really hyped up.